Okay, I want to do two more questions with you. One, when you look toward the election in November, how are you collecting information? How are you processing it feels like there's too much for us to listen to as far as making a next decision. How does an 8 move toward an election?
A big thing for me is I do seek out people whose bias is different from mine. Because again, like if someone's just telling me the stuff that I already think, I'm not really gaining a lot of information from that. I'm really drawn to people who are thinking about the thing from 30,000 feet. With 24-hour news and with social media, every week there's a new catastrophe. And the problem with a new catastrophe every week is it's super hard to tell the difference between somebody's nip slip and like real racial injustice in America, because like every week there's a new thing coming at you. So the moderators who are looking at the picture from a wider vantage point don't get as tripped up on the day-to-day stuff that can really get, especially as emotional creatures, we can get really wrapped up in all that and can see the bigger picture of it. But I also think there's a ton of players in the media space that just are bad actors. They don't have the intention of learning or of advancing the common good. So those are the two things that I look for. One, or I guess three, like someone who is different than me, who's going to teach me something, someone who sees the bigger picture of it, and then someone who really seems like they're leaning into making a better republic as opposed to just clickbait or grabbing some cash or just stirring up more anger and more fear and strife, because there's so much of that. And I think with those three lenses, it takes me a lot of time to find a new voice that I think, oh, this is
That's what I'm going to say
helpful.
is, do you have voices on both sides that you would say out loud that you trust?
I mean, there's this whole collective of people that have been loosely named the intellectual dark web, and it's
I think that's the first time we've ever said dark web on the podcast.
Oh, really?
So
I
let's
love
go.
Well, these guys are like they're all pretty moderate. Most of them are slightly left-leaning, but Eric Weinstein, I think, is amazing. I think Joe Rogan is fascinating because he's
fascinating.
He's so curious, and I think curiosity is like maybe the most noble of traits. That curious people can be confident in the things that they do know, but are really open to the things that they don't know and are excited about moving that stuff forward. So there's, Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, and there's a kind of a collection of all of them that kind of bounce things back and forth to each other. And they're all, for the most part, kind of in this moderate space, some leaning a little more right, some leaning a little bit more left, but feel like real honest players of trying to like see the truth in it all. I will say, just as an aside too, like how do we end up with election cycles where I feel like there's like serious problems with both of these candidates?
Yeah.
And like even the last time around, it felt like there were serious problems with both of these candidates.
Right.
I don't know many people.
You feel that too, Leslie?
Oh gosh, yes.
Baby boomers are doing their own thing. Anyone under the age of 60, I don't know any of them that are really stoked about either of these candidates, and I felt like that before. And I think left-leaning ideologies say these big things are really scary, and right-leaning ideologies say these are the big things that are scary. And I'm pretty sure that all big things get scary.
Yeah.
Big churches, that can get scary.
Listen, you're right.
So, like, I don't know, the closer to the ground that stuff is, it feels like our human liberty and our human dignity can be restored a lot more. And obviously we're seeing with George Floyd and all of the, not just people in Minneapolis, but people around the country and people around the world, saying when whatever these institutions are, police unions or police forces or city councils, when they get so big, there's so much stuff that gets lost in the middle.
Yeah.
And man, I hope there's a course correction to all of that.
Yeah.
And I think it is. I think on the horizon there are really, really good things ahead.
There are people trying, it feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leslie, you're nodding like crazy as David's talking.
Yes. I think for me, I don't want to have to choose left or right. I want to be able to make my own choices.
Right.
And so for me, I think what I so wish I could see is different. I think that's part of me. Also, that little bit of rebellious, like, nature of, like, let's do something different and have someone different.
Yeah.
But then I can also get discouraged, like the more research and study I've done over the last couple of years about just the different systems we have in place and things like that. It can feel discouraging because you're like, how do we turn it? Like, how do we turn the tide, you know? And especially when we do seem to have candidates that just don't seem to hold to that. And so you feel a little bit like, how do we do this? But I do think what we've been seeing lately with how just the people who live here now, they care so much more. And so I think instead of us kind of like walking blindly through our lives, just kind of doing what we do in our everyday, because that's just what we do. It's not like anyone's meaning to. You're just caught up in your own life. I think people are starting to say, no, I need to care about that. Oh, I need to pay attention. Oh, why do we do that? How does that function? And so I just don't think that we've done that a lot in the past. And so it's exciting to me to see that people are starting to pay attention, myself included.
Yeah, me too.
You know, and so I will say I don't have like certain people that I like are my go-tos. One person that I love to read her writing and her take, I actually just was sent an article this morning by Michelle Alexander. She writes for the New York Times. She also wrote The New Jim Crow, but she writes a lot in like the political arena too. And she sent, I read an article she wrote this morning, and it was so well done. And I was like, oh my goodness, yes, if we could move in that direction.
Right.
I also listened to a podcast last week. I'm trying to remember Ezra's last name. Anyway, I can't remember. And he was interviewing Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yes.
And they got into the political perspective a little bit more. And I don't know if you've listened or read much of Ta-Nehisi, but
I just listened to Between the World and Me.
Oh, yeah.
Oof.
He has a way of sharing perspective that just, you're like, like I would have never like quite looked at it that way.
Yeah.
And when they were in that podcast interview, I feel like that's what they did for thinking through our candidates for November.
Yeah.
They had a little bit of a shift for me that made me go, oh, okay. That gives me a little hope. Like that gives me a little bit more to go on than what I was able to just come up with on my own.
Yeah.
So that podcast was really, really good to me.